Alice and her ex-boyfriend had a 10-year promise. The day he came back to the country, they would get back together. She'd laughed it off, explaining, "That was just a joke from when we were kids. He's not coming back." I believed her. But on the day her ex returned, Alice threw a huge welcome home party for him. All their friends were there. The only one she forgot to invite was me, her current boyfriend. In that moment, I knew it was over between us. When Alice came home that night, she brought me a bouquet of yellow roses. Unlike the usual joy I felt, this time I didn't care. I just glanced at them before going back to my work. She wasn't upset, just placed the flowers on the table and came over to coax me. "Still mad?" I already explained. "Eric just got back, and he doesn't have any family here. It was only right for me to host something for him. It was just a casual get-together with friends. I didn't bring you along because you don't know anyone in our circle. I was afraid you'd feel awkward." Her reasoning was flawless. Her circle was full of research professors and academic titans. I was just another guy with a desk job fresh out of college. I couldn't fit in with her crowd, but Eric could. After all, besides being her ex-boyfriend, Eric was also her college classmate, a colleague in her field, and her platonic best friend. It was only natural for them to reunite when he came back. Even now, as Alice tried to placate me, my anger must have seemed like a childish tantrum to her, petty, immature, and unreasonable. But I wasn't angry anymore. I had no interest in dragging it out. So I just muttered a dismissive, "I get it," closed my laptop, and got ready to go to bed. Before I could turn away, Alice grabbed my wrist. "Lucas, there's really nothing between me and Eric. That was over a long time ago. We're both adults." "I know. We're all adults. Exes can be friends." I pulled my hand back, my face blank. "Since he's all alone here, you should take good care of him." Alice froze, seemingly stunned by my calmness. The words tumbled out of her mouth. "You're not bothered by it anymore?" For 3 years, I had always been bothered by the ex she kept in touch with. This past year, nearly every single one of our fights had been about Eric. I'm a firm believer that the best exes are the ones who act like they're dead. Eric was on the other side of the world, but that didn't stop him from calling her in the middle of the night for international calls that lasted all night long. Thousands of miles didn't stop them from following each other on every social media account or from keeping their matching couple profile pictures on Instagram. I had thrown huge fits about it, trying to force her to cut off all contact with him. But Alice could never bring herself to do it. Eric's all alone trying to make it in a foreign country. It's already so hard for him. "Can't you have a little empathy?" Her friends would chime in too. The fact that Eric and Alice are still in touch just proves they're both over it. "Why are you so hung up on the past?" What a joke. Was I the one hung up on the past? Then why was Alice's computer still filled with photos of them from when they were dating? Why, after 7 years apart, was his name in her phone saved as Eric, while mine was just my full name, Lucas Dawson? I was tired, especially after I saw Eric's Instagram post tonight. He'd posted a selfie of himself leaning on Alice's shoulder with the caption, "Our 10-year promise. Better late than never. Better late than never." It's hard to describe how I felt in that moment. It was like I'd fought tooth and nail to defend my territory, only to suddenly realize it had never belonged to me in the first place. Well, Eric was back now, and conveniently, she was single and he was single. Oh wait, my thoughts snapped back to the present. I met Alice's searching gaze and calmly shook my head. "Whatever you want to do, I don't mind anymore. Because we were breaking up anyway. People are strange creatures." I was so in love with Alice. But the moment I truly decided to let her go, I didn't feel the heart-wrenching pain I'd expected. I'd had a crush on Alice since we were kids. My mom and her mom were best friends, so ever since I can remember, a fixed part of our New Year's tradition was spending a day visiting her family. I always looked forward to that day, because on that day, I'd get to see the beautiful Alice. She would give me milk candies, teach me how to fold paper stars, and read me stories. She was 6 years older than me. When I finished elementary school, she was heading off to college. The day she left, I cried my eyes out, clinging to her clothes and begging her not to go. Both our families roared with laughter. Alice didn't know what to do. Finally, She bent down and coaxed me, saying that if I worked hard and got into the same school as her, we could go to college together. I made her pinky promise, swearing I would get into her university. Only later did I find out she went to MIT. I studied until my hair fell out, but I only managed to get into a college in the same city. When we met again, she had changed a lot. She was still kind to me, but it was the kindness you show a neighborhood kid. Our only real interactions were when she'd give me a ride back to our hometown during the holidays. Then, during my junior year, I broke my leg and was in a wheelchair for 3 months. Somehow she heard about it and insisted I move into her apartment so she could take care of me. As we spent more time together, the feelings I had buried came rushing back. I finally worked up the courage to confess to her. But she rejected me and even started to distance herself. I was hurt and sad, and I swore I'd never speak to her again. I never expected things to take a turn just a few days later. She called me that night. Though she tried to keep her voice steady, I could hear it breaking and trembling. I hung up and snuck out of my dorm. When I got to her apartment, I knocked for a long time before the door finally opened. The moment it did, the reek of alcohol nearly knocked me over. The woman who was usually as cool and composed as the moon was standing there with red-rimmed eyes, staring down at me. Most of her was hidden in the darkness, silent and so broken it made my heart ache. And my heart did ache for her. I stayed with her and we sat in silence the whole night. But from that day on, our relationship progressed rapidly. We were together for 3 years and had even started talking about marriage. Everything had fallen into place so perfectly that I'd forgotten the reason for her breakdown that night. Eric had broken their 10-year promise. I decided to break up with Alice in a week. My parents were coming to visit that Friday. I didn't want things to get too ugly. After all, both our families were thrilled about us and were already waiting for a wedding invitation. As she said, only kids cut people off completely after a breakup. Adults are supposed to part on good terms. Over the next few days, Alice was even gentler with me. She relentlessly brought me flowers and gifts, picked me up from work every day, and tried to start conversations to lighten the mood when I was quiet. She even promised that on the day my parents arrived, we would go see the play I'd been dying to see. In the end, I was the only one there to pick up my parents. She said there was an issue with some lab data and she'd be a little late, but she promised she'd be there for dinner and told us to go ahead to the private room we'd booked at the restaurant. By the time my parents and I finished the play, she still hadn't shown up. My mom tried to smooth things over, holding my hand and comforting me. Alice must have been really stuck. These last-minute things happen. Don't you go home and give her a hard time about it. We're staying for a few days anyway. My dad nodded in agreement. I forced a smile, not sure if I should tell them, because just a moment ago, I'd been scrolling through Eric's social feed. He'd posted a selfie from a hotel with the caption, "Thank God for you. Every time something goes wrong, you're right there by my side." In the background of his photo was the silhouette of a tall woman. I recognized her. It was Alice. How pathetic. She stood my parents up all evening to be with her ex-boyfriend? After dinner, I dropped my parents off at their hotel and took a cab to the location tagged in Eric's post. When Alice opened the door and saw me, a flash of shock crossed her face, but she quickly composed herself and greeted me with a gentle tone. "What are you doing here? I've been meaning to introduce you to Eric." She put her arm around my waist and led me inside. It wasn't just Eric, several of Alice's grad students from her research team were there too. When they saw me, their expressions turned a little strange. Alice never really liked me visiting her at the university, always saying that work and personal life should be kept separate. So, of all her students, only one had ever met me when he came to our house to drop off some documents. He recognized me. "So you're the professor's boyfriend?" He stared at me, a weird look on his face, then glanced instinctively at Eric, looking like he wanted to say something but was holding back. It was Eric who spoke first. "You must be Lucas, right? I remember seeing pictures of you on Alice's phone. You were in overalls, so cute. Look at you now, all grown up." It was the first time I'd met Eric in person. He was just as handsome and charming as in his photos. He walked over and put an arm around my shoulder, all warmth and enthusiasm. "You're just as handsome as your pictures." No wonder our dear Alice kept you hidden away. You have no idea how much we teased her for dating her little childhood friend from next door. Going after someone so young, what a predator, right? He feigned disapproval and playfully punched Alice on the shoulder. The gesture was so smooth and natural, as if they'd rehearsed it 1,000 times. Watching them, I couldn't help but laugh. Alice, is this what you meant by being stuck? Too busy to see my parents? When you're truly speechless, you really do just laugh. I shrugged off Eric's hand. The atmosphere turned cold. Alice's lips moved, her expression tinged with guilt. Eric spoke up again, his face a mask of remorse. I'm so sorry, man. I just found out Alice was supposed to have dinner with your parents tonight. Some data came out wrong at the last minute, so I had to ask her to bring the whole team to help me sort it out. How about this? Tomorrow, I'll treat you and your parents to a meal to make up for it. His words were seamless, his attitude perfect. Impossible to find fault with. But did my girlfriend and I need him to join us when we were seeing my parents? Before I could refuse, Alice cut in. Lucas isn't the petty type, besides, today was a special situation. Eric just got back, and if this data was wrong, he would have lost his job. She looked up at me and smiled, her eyes still filled with that familiar tenderness, and coaxed me softly. I'll apologize to your parents tomorrow. We can all have dinner together when we're done here. How about it? This was the first time she had ever invited me to one of her gatherings. So that's all it took for me to be included in her social circle, a single sentence from her. And I had waited years for it. But now I didn't want to go. No thanks. I came to break up with you. Alice didn't get to finish her late-night snack. On the way home, her face was uncharacteristically cold. Lucas, you were completely out of line today. My students were there. What kind of a scene was that to make in public? She scolded me as soon as we got inside. I watched her sit down on the sofa, her chest rising and falling with anger, her lips pressed into a thin line. After a long moment, she rubbed her temples wearily and continued. What are my students going to think of you? They won't think there's anything wrong between me and Eric, they'll just think you're being irrational. And you wonder why I don't bring you to my gatherings. When you act so childish, how can I trust you? Alice, I cut her off. While she was silently figuring out how to lecture me further, I had already packed my bags. I stood in the entryway and said calmly, I don't care what they think. It's not like we'll be seeing each other again. Lucas Dawson. Seeing that I was serious, Alice finally snapped. She shot up from the sofa and strode toward me, her voice rising for the first time. You're breaking up with me just because I missed dinner tonight? I nodded calmly. Yes, because of that. And I should have broken up with her a long time ago. The moment Eric made that first overseas call. The moment I saw they were still following each other on every account. The moment I discovered they still had matching profile pictures. An entire ocean couldn't stop the shadow named Eric from looming over my 3-year relationship with Alice. As if she didn't expect my answer, Alice was momentarily at a loss for words. She bit her lip. Lucas, I don't want to explain the thing with Eric again. How about this? I promise I'll keep my distance from him from now on. And I'll bring you to all my get-togethers. Is that good enough for you? Hearing her say that, I almost wanted to laugh. Women know everything. She knew I minded her being too close to Eric. She knew I cared that she never let me into her circle. She knew exactly why I was angry. She just didn't care. She thought a young guy like me could be placated with a little sweet talk. Even now, she still thought my being serious was just a tactic to get more from her. I'd had enough. I raised my hand and slapped her. Hard. Bring whoever you want. I don't give a damn. I thought my parents would be against me breaking up with Alice. But when they saw me check into the hotel room next to theirs with my suitcase, the first thing my dad said was, "Why didn't you call me? I would have come to get you." I didn't cry when I broke up with Alice, but hearing my dad say that, a lump formed in my throat and tears started streaming down my face. They fussed over me, trying to calm me down. Once I had settled a bit, I asked them why they didn't ask what happened between Alice and me. My mom said, "We've seen how much you love Alice ever since you were little. For you to give up on someone you love that much, she must have hurt you very badly. So I support whatever you decide." My son's happiness comes first. My dad was even more blunt. My son deserves the best girl in the world. If you want to break up, then break up. If you never want to date or get married, your mom and I can support you forever. In that moment, I realized that their approval of Alice wasn't because they'd watched her grow up or because she'd always been exceptional. It was simply because she was the one I had chosen. I was deeply moved and also deeply guilty. My parents were the people who loved me most in this world, yet I had recklessly moved to this unfamiliar city for a woman and stayed for so many years. I decided to leave with my parents. I had come to Boston for Alice. Unlike her, who had already bought a house and put down roots, I was just a recent grad. It was better to leave now while I was still young than to flounder here for years and get nowhere. When I went to resign, my boss was reluctant to let me go. He saw a lot of potential in me, so he decided to transfer me to the branch in my hometown instead. As I was leaving the office after finishing all the paperwork, I saw Alice's car parked on the side of the road. I wasn't surprised. Knowing Alice, even if we were breaking up, she wouldn't have let it end on such a final, harsh note as last night. What I didn't expect was to see Eric in the passenger seat when I walked over. "Lucas, can we talk?" He rolled down the window, his tone sincere. "I know this is all my fault, that I caused the trouble between you and Alice. I'm really sorry." He was always so polite and gentle with me. In contrast, after last night, I was probably known throughout Alice's circle as the petty, jealous one. But it didn't matter. I didn't care anymore. I rejected him coldly. There's nothing to talk about. Alice and I are done, and I have no plans to be friends. In the driver's seat, Alice stared straight ahead, her face dark. It seemed she was still upset about last night and didn't even turn to look at me. But when she heard what I said, I clearly saw the knuckles of her hand gripping the steering wheel turn white. Eric looked even more awkward. He turned away uncomfortably and nudged Alice with his elbow, whispering, "You made your boyfriend mad and you're just going to sit there? Aren't you afraid he's going to run off for good?" His tone was full of concern. Hearing it made my stomach turn. Eric always spoke with the condescending air of someone who'd been there before. When he found out I fought with Alice because of him, he even took it upon himself to teach her how to win me back. Buy flowers, give gifts, whisper sweet nothings. He always ended their chats with, "It's not like it was in our day. These young guys need to be coddled. If you don't put in the effort, they'll just leave. And then you'll be all alone, and I won't be able to come back and get together with you." Alice listened obediently. She got out of the car and, like a perfect gentleman, opened the back door for me. Pursing her lips, she said softly, "I specifically brought Eric today to explain things to you." She emphasized the words, as if to show how open and honest they were. As if to prove that I was the one making a big deal out of nothing. "Whatever." I scoffed and walked right past their car. "No need to explain. I don't want to hear it." On my way back, I got a text from Alice. "Lucas, if you're going to be this stubborn, then let's both just take some time to cool off." She had lost her patience, too. This had happened once before. I'd found out that the watch she brought back for me from a business trip abroad was one Eric had helped her pick out. He'd even tried it on. She ended up buying 2 identical ones. I smashed the watch and we had a massive fight. It was a terrible argument. In the end, she had thrown out the same line, "Let's both cool off," and stormed out of the apartment. She didn't come back for days. At first, I held out, refusing to contact her. But as time went on, I became a wreck and finally couldn't take it anymore. I went to the university to find her. The pathetic thing was, because I wasn't a student there and the security guard didn't know me, I couldn't even get on campus. I called her, but my calls went straight to voicemail. I waited from morning until evening before I finally saw her coming out of the main gate. I don't really remember how we made up, but I'll never forget the feeling of panic that day, in the sweltering heat, as I collapsed into her arms, my sweat mixing with tears, sobbing that I didn't want to break up. She was using the same old trick. But this time, my heart felt nothing. I just calmly opened the message, and then I blocked her number. I thought I would be devastated. I was determined that no matter how hard it was, I would grit my teeth and get through it without looking back. But a whole month went by. I used my vacation days to show my parents around Boston, went back to my hometown, got settled, and started at the new company, and I didn't think about Alice once. Her mom, however, found out I was back and gently prodded, asking why I hadn't come back with Alice. I didn't say anything. After that, she didn't ask again. But from then on, Mrs. Evans started sending me profiles of eligible young women, teaming up with my mom to analyze photos and bios to see who would be the best fit for me. It was both funny and frustrating. I tried to refuse a few times, but they were persistent. In the end, I gave in and went on one blind date. I never expected Alice to show up at the restaurant and drag me away. When she hauled me back to my parents' house, my mom and her mom were sitting on the sofa eating sunflower seeds. Seeing us, Mrs. Evans spoke first. "How was the date? Alice, you should be a good big sister and help out. We've got to find the best girl for Lucas." "Mom." Alice looked utterly defeated. She had been stressed out from rushing over, and now her own mother was rubbing salt in the wound. She ran a hand through her hair in frustration. "What kind of mother are you? Instead of helping me win Lucas back, you're behind my back trying to steal my man by finding him a new girlfriend. Didn't you two break up?" Mrs. Evans looked confused, then waved her hand dismissively. "Even if you did, you two grew up together. If you're not a couple, you're like brother and sister. We're not that old-fashioned." I really wanted to laugh. The boomerang came right back and hit her. Seeing the stunned and frustrated look on Alice's face, I suddenly understood why neither her mom nor my parents had contacted her or asked about our relationship since the breakup. "Who said we broke up? Lucas and I were just taking a break." Alice looked incredibly uncomfortable, her fists clenched tightly, her eyes avoiding mine. "Who takes a 2-month break? Besides, I had already ended things." So I feigned surprise. "Alice, I thought when you said we should cool off, you were accepting the breakup. We're adults. We should know when to let things go." As I spoke, her face turned pale. Her tall frame seemed to sway. After a long pause, she finally forced out, "Lucas, I never wanted to break up. But I'm sure that I do." I was calm and serious. "Alice, I've made up my mind." My composure terrified her. For the first time, I saw her panic. Forgetting our parents were there, she reached for me, her voice choked with tears. "Lucas, if you're bothered by Eric, I'll delete him. I'll never contact him again. If you want to meet my friends, I'll introduce you to every single person I know. Lucas, I promise from now on, I will have no contact with any ex-boyfriends." Alice's apology was sincere, and I believe she really could do it. Just like years ago, when Eric went abroad and made that 10-year promise, she had waited faithfully for him until he broke his word, only then starting a new relationship. She was that kind of self-disciplined person. You can test me. A month, a year, 5 years. If I ever contact him, you can break up with me and never forgive me. Just give me one chance. I can prove it. Seeing my continued silence, Alice made another promise. At her words, my mom's expression softened. She seemed about to speak, but Mrs. Evans cut her off. "Prove what? It's a day late and a dollar short. My Lucas is young and handsome. Why should he waste his life hung up on you? Mom, whose daughter are you anyway? Didn't you tell me you wanted Lucas as a son-in-law more than anything?" Alice yelled, finally snapping. At that moment, she must have truly understood what it felt like to be completely alone. I looked at Mrs. Evans, touched. I really hadn't expected her to defend me so fiercely. After all, she had been the happiest when Alice and I got together. She always said it was like adding joy upon joy, and she was already looking for cufflinks for me. Every time we met, she would urge Alice to hurry up and marry me. But now she was saying, "I love Lucas, but I also respect his choices. You're the one who lost such a great guy. Am I supposed to force him to be miserable in my family just because I like him?" Mrs. Evans was the one who took Alice away. Her exact words were, "Don't embarrass yourself here." It was only then that I found out what had happened. Apparently, the night I left, Mrs. Evans had called Alice and asked her exactly what went on between us. After hearing Alice's side of the story, she hung up without a word. Alice had always thought her mom was on her side. She never expected that a few days later, her mom would start sending her profiles of nice girls, asking her to help pick one out for me. Alice tried to contact me again after that. She sent me multiple friend requests. Her messages said she hoped we could talk things over calmly. I accepted her request but immediately shut her down, simply sending her a screenshot of Eric's recent social media posts. In the month since I'd left Boston, Alice had appeared in every single one of his posts. The two of them doing experiments at the university, on a date at a restaurant. The most recent one was of Eric sitting at the dining table in the house I had shared with her for 3 years, in front of a lavish meal she had cooked. I didn't give Alice a chance to respond. I sent the screenshot and immediately blocked her again. After all, I was a very good ex. I didn't deliberately avoid Alice. But since we lived in different cities, our paths rarely crossed. The only updates I got were occasional mentions from my mom about her career in Boston. She and Eric didn't get together. Instead, she dated a few other guys, though none of the relationships lasted long. My mom was a bit hesitant when she told me about it. I actually thought that Alice, seeing how she couldn't let you go, would have stayed single. I didn't expect her to move on so quickly. My mom sighed. I just smiled and teased her. We broke up. You can't expect her to stay celibate for my sake. Can you? It's a good thing. Proves we've both moved on. That's one way to look at it. But you haven't dated anyone all these years. Your Auntie Evans introduced you to so many great women. But you haven't pursued a single one. My mom was convinced by my logic, but then she felt it was unfair. Even though it was her son who did the breaking up, it seemed like Alice was the one who had gotten over the heartbreak and was living her life. I chuckled. Pausing my typing, I said seriously, who says I haven't been developing a relationship? I've gone from project assistant to vice president of my company and even got company shares. If my job were a person, we'd already be married. Oh, stop it. Who marries their job? My mom grumbled, but she was just saying it. My parents have always supported me unconditionally in every decision I make, whether it's about love or my career. So these past few years, my life has been full and happy. Alice and I met again. My cousin was getting married, and I was the best man. She was a classmate of the groom. She wasn't alone, Eric was with her. They both looked uncomfortable when they saw me, clearly not expecting me to be there. Even Eric's gaze lacked its usual warmth, replaced by a hint of defensiveness and scrutiny. I, on the other hand, was unfazed. I didn't even say hello and just went back to greeting the guests. Alice and Eric sat at the table with the other classmates. The atmosphere was lively, but halfway through the reception, a handsome young man suddenly burst in. He didn't rush toward the head table, but instead stormed over to Alice's and flipped it over. Alice, what the hell is wrong with you? It's your classmate's wedding, and you don't bring your boyfriend, you bring your high school sweetheart from God knows how many years ago? Seriously? Let us explain. We're all just classmates. Eric just hitched a ride with me. Besides, you don't know anyone here, and I was worried you'd get carsick. That's why I didn't bring you. Don't be so childish at a wedding. Alice was publicly humiliated, but the man was relentless. He even slapped Eric across the face, throwing the entire reception into chaos. Afterward, my cousin fumed for a long time before her new husband managed to calm her down. When I was leaving the hotel, I saw him. The hot-headed young man from before was sitting by a flower bed, crying by himself. I was going to just leave, but I couldn't help it. I walked over and asked if he needed a ride. Dude, thank you. I didn't mean to ruin your wedding. Just tell me how much it costs and I'll pay you back. After using up my entire pack of tissues, the young man finally stopped crying. He looked at me with red-rimmed eyes, stared at my face for a long time, and then his expression grew awkward. I've seen you before. You're on Alice's computer, too. I didn't react, just kept my eyes on the road. The young man, however, had opened the floodgates. But I don't hate you. I really hate Eric, though. He's like a leech. Exes can still be friends. My ass. He's always hanging around Alice. But I've never seen you before. I've checked all of Alice's social media accounts, and I can't find you anywhere. The young man was surprisingly honest. Hearing this, I couldn't help but smile. You probably won't. I've blocked my ex on every platform where you can follow someone. The young man seemed stunned by this. After a long silence, he asked, Dude, did you break up with Alice because of Eric? We were stopped at a red light. I turned to look at the young man in the passenger seat. He couldn't have been much older than a college grad, with a fresh, innocent look about him. His eyes were dark and strikingly handsome as he looked at me. He bit his lip as if afraid he'd overstepped, yet still curious. Pursed my lips. The light changed, and I hit the gas. No. The young man was taken aback, clearly not believing me. Before he could say anything, I continued, "It was because of Alice. You can never wake up someone who's pretending to be asleep." All these years, Alice hadn't changed. The young man was stunned by my words and remained silent for the rest of the ride to his hotel. As the car stopped, I saw Alice. She looked lost for a moment when she saw me, then hesitated for a few seconds before walking over. Through the half-open window, she thanked me. "Thank you for bringing him back." I didn't respond. I watched as Alice meekly tried to coax the man out of the car, using the same tactics she used to use on me. But the man was unmoved by her gentleness. When he got out of the car, he broke up with her on the spot. Alice didn't chase him into the hotel. Instead, she turned back to look at me. Her expression a complex mix of emotion, surprise, and admiration. It had been several years. I was no longer the naive kid from before. Today, I was in a well-tailored suit, looking sharp and put together. Years in the professional world had given me an air of competence and confidence. Our eyes met. After a long silence, she was the one to break it. "So you finally believe me?" There was never anything possible between me and Eric. Years later, Alice's excuses were still just as self-righteous. I watched her quietly and then smiled. "So?" I shot back. Watching Alice falter, I'll admit, felt pretty damn good. Even seeing that young man publicly humiliate her and Eric today, right at my cousin's wedding, a small part of me enjoyed it. I thought Alice deserved it. Snapping back to the present, I gave Alice a warm smile and said, "Nothing's possible between you and Eric, and nothing's possible between you and me. I wish you the best of luck." With that, I drove off without a second glance. Later, my mom told me that the young man who crashed the wedding broke up with Alice. But before he did, he downloaded all of his chat logs with Eric and sent them to her university and Eric's workplace. Even though Alice hadn't actually cheated, the incident damaged her reputation significantly. The university held a meeting and decided to transfer her from her research position to a role in the logistics department. Alice fell into a slump for a few years after that. Eventually, Alice got married to Eric because Eric trapped her with a child. I found out later that Alice had been diagnosed with infertility. Eric somehow produced a boy he claimed was his son with an ex-girlfriend, Stacy. The boy's name was Alex Evans, and he used the child to force Alice to marry him. My mom said that because of this, Mrs. Evans, who rarely interfered in Alice's life, went to Boston, gave Alice a furious lecture, and swore that Eric would never be welcome in their home. A few more years passed. During the first year of my marriage, I brought my wife, Lily, to visit Mrs. Evans for the new year, and unexpectedly ran into Alice again. By then, her son was 5 years old. She had changed a lot. The vibrant confidence was gone. Even on New Year's Day, she looked drab and worn out. Her son was plainly dressed, thin, frail, and a little shy. She had brought her son back for the holiday alone. Just before dinner, I was walking past the balcony and heard her arguing on the phone. "I told you my mom doesn't like you. I brought our son, didn't I? Besides, everyone here is from my circle. You don't know anyone. It would just be awkward if you came. You're not happy? Then let's get a divorce. Eric, I have had it with you. Why do you think we got married in the first place? I told you a long time ago we're over. We can be friends, but a relationship is impossible. TSK. I listened for a moment, then quietly slid the balcony door shut for her. She probably wouldn't have much of an appetite for dinner tonight. I thought, I was always the model child, smart and successful. So I always considered myself mature, better at handling problems than anyone else. When Lucas first mentioned the 10-year promise with Eric, I was secretly a little pleased. I thought his anxiety meant he cared about me. I knew this little neighborhood boy had always had a crush on me. I reassured him that Eric wasn't coming back. What I really wanted to say was that, as a mature adult, I could handle my relationship with an ex perfectly well. In my view, a breakup is just the end of one type of relationship. There are many ways for people to exist in each other's lives. So I kept in touch with Eric, interacting occasionally. As for the matching profile pictures and contact names Lucas mentioned, I thought those were just superficial things that only children would care about. But I never expected Lucas to break up with me so decisively. At first, I didn't take it seriously at all. I thought he was just throwing a tantrum. He was so naive and simple. He was probably just getting jealous over nothing, like any other immature kid. So I patiently tried to coax him a few times. But he just pushed it further. He made a scene in front of my students and even slapped me. It didn't hurt, but it was humiliating. In our relationship, I had always seen myself as the one in charge. I had spoiled him too much. It had made him more and more unreasonable, so I stopped trying to placate him. I figured that in a few days he would cave and come find me just like before. But I never expected him to leave Boston. And worse, his parents and even my parents didn't take my side. Instead, they helped him look for new people to date. I was furious. For the first time, I humbled myself and went back to find him. I thought I had given Lucas a perfect way to save face and come back, but he just told me very seriously that he had been planning to break up with me for a long time. Later, I dated a few other guys. I believed that the adult way to move on was to look forward. But I found I couldn't fully commit to any of them. And every single one of them was just as childish, immature, and unreasonable as Lucas. One of them was the worst. He crashed my friend's wedding, and the day he broke up with me, he said, "That guy was right. You can never wake up someone who's pretending to be asleep. It's not that you can't draw a line with Eric. You just enjoy the feeling of effortlessly playing your ex and your current boyfriend against each other. You're disgusting. You deserve to die alone." I admit those words stung. Maybe it was the phrase "die alone," or maybe it was because I disagreed with him. Or maybe it was because those words originally came from Lucas. These past few years, I had pretended to move on, but like a thief in the night, I secretly followed everything about Lucas's life. I watched him get promoted, mature from a boy into a man, buy his own house, get a cat. I was in a daze during that time, and somehow I ended up sleeping with Eric. He trapped me with a child. We had no choice but to get married. But after we did, our marriage was a chaotic mess. I could no longer handle my relationships with ease. But Lucas was happy. He had a successful career and a wife who loved him. He was the one who ended up living his life effortlessly.